I want to start by welcoming our guests and welcome our panelists here to our first Community Connections for the year. So this was something that we started, I think last year, but it might have been the year before, just as a way to connect with our community and keep them informed and to really drive discussion across the district. So for the first session tonight, we've chosen to focus on the work that we're doing around culturally responsive education and our diversity, equity, and inclusion work across the district. So I'm happy to have three outstanding panelists with me tonight who are administrators here within the district. And so I want to turn it over to them to introduce themselves and their role.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chrissy Miga, and I am the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction here in West Irondequoit. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cristal, and I am the Director of Humanities.
Hello, everyone. I'm Orlando Marrero, and I'm the Director of STEAM.
All right. So for tonight's presentation, we build in some checkpoints during the presentation that will allow for discussion in certain areas. So feel free to hold your questions for those opportunities. We also have the Q&A as an option for our guests. And if you have a question during something that we're presenting, you can just simply pop that into the Q&A and Mr. DeVeronica will bring that to our attention and we can answer that on the fly as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Miga. And Ms. Miga, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. We are incredibly excited to have this opportunity once again to talk to our West Irondequoit community regarding our ongoing work to create culturally responsive curriculum. And we know that we've been able to share just the breadth of our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we do want to let you know that specifically tonight, we're going to be focused on culturally responsive curriculum and then how that work is coming alive in our classrooms with students. And so we wanted to be able to provide some examples for you all to see what that looks like. But before we get into those details, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mrs. Cristal, to lead us in our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Ms. Miga. So I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. The West Irondequoit Central School District acknowledges the Indigenous people of this region and that this school district building sits on the homelands of the Anatwaka or Seneca of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It is on these lands that we teach, learn, and live.
Thank you. So as we begin tonight, I wanted to bring us back to these three goals that have been communicated to our parents, guardians, and community via a few letters from myself and the Office of Instruction around our goals, specifically towards culturally responsive education and culturally responsive curriculum. So these were goals that we actually set even right prior to our strategic planning process and its completion. And then these were shared again last year through a letter to community and families in October 2021. But we thought it was important to start here to really just show our ongoing commitment to doing our best to be able to communicate what this work looks like and what it means for students. So you can see our first goal was that clear and consistent communication to help build understanding. Our second goal was to create a multi-year plan where we establish common components of culturally responsive education and then begin the process to review and revise curriculum to match what those components are. And again, how do we then communicate that progress to continue to build understanding? So throughout this presentation, we're absolutely going to hit goals 1 and 3. That's the purpose of this community connection, is to update you on the ongoing work and what it looks like. And then specifically for the second goal, we have created that multi-year plan within our strategic plan, which as we built that strategic plan, that multi-year 5-year plan, we made sure to embed those layers of culturally responsive education so that we didn't have two different plans working against each other. We had one cohesive plan to accomplish our goals. And so if we go to the next slide, The other part of that second goal was to create those components of what does culturally responsive curriculum look like. And so these 4 terms are really drivers to the curriculum work that we do in West Irondequoit. So to what kids learn about and what our teachers teach about, we want to ensure that our curriculum is in a place where it's coherent, viable, guaranteed, and culturally responsive. And this slide was created through the great work led by Mrs. Cristal and Dr. Marrero to create a curriculum process in which we achieve these 4 areas. So when we talk about coherent, we want curriculum that makes sense. There's that vertical alignment, K through 12. So really that backwards planning of how everything fits together, and that it's organized. Viable means that we're putting together curriculum that teachers can actually do. It's not aspirational. It's something that can be achieved in the classroom. It's guaranteed. This is really important as we view curriculum as a promise to our community. So what is every student, every classroom, and every building going to engage in, depending on the content area, the grade level that is being addressed through the curriculum? And then, of course, how do we guarantee that it is culturally responsive? And so this work was achieved through our District Curriculum Council, which is a K-12 representative group that includes teachers, staff, administrators, parents, and this is what we have in place, and hopefully our promise to you, and you'll see that these experiences that we're sharing with you are what we're building into our curriculum so that they're experiences that, again, are guaranteed for every student, every classroom, and every building. So diving more deeply into the culturally responsive aspect of curriculum, we wanted to ensure that as we create this curriculum, we had a way to not only monitor the creation of the curriculum, but again, to ensure that the curriculum represented components, like we said in that second goal, that reflect culturally responsive education. And so we created something we're calling the single point rubric. And it is a tool that, again, was created at the District Curriculum Council, or DCC, to review curriculum. So as curriculum is created by teams of teachers and staff, it then eventually comes to the DCC to be reviewed, and the single point rubric is utilized, and basically the curriculum is checked for this 4-part equity framework. Okay, that the curriculum addresses student identity, it supports the specific skills that students need in relation to the standards to achieve. Student intellect is supported, meaning that it is helping students to know the content better. And then it asks, we use the tool to look and see, is there criticality? Are the students being asked to think at a critically high level? Are they asked to examine the world around them and to be able to use the information that they are gaining to make decisions, to move their learning forward? And so these 4 pieces are those components from that second goal that we're now have a process to ensure that we see these components in our curriculum in West Irondequoit. So we wanted to share this first as a way to be able to provide the context of how we are integrating the examples that Kim and Orlando will share in our actual curriculum. So tonight, to organize how we're going to share some of these examples, we are actually pulling directly from the DEI policy that we have in district that was created through a stakeholder committee, and then with great support from our Board of Education. We we wanted to make sure that we were showing how this DEI policy, and specifically this is the section that addresses curriculum, how this is again coming to life in classrooms. So it's an important note that this section of the policy, so this is pulled directly from there, really speaks to, yes, the curricular pieces, but it also was pulled directly from the call to action that was provided to us as educators from New York State Department of Education in 2021. So we are being really purposeful to review the guidance that we're being given from New York State and then integrate that into our policies and then our curriculum and our processes to make sure that we are responding to this call to action and we are providing these opportunities for our students. So you'll see again, this really reads like an index of what we're going to show you tonight. And we're going to take you through different examples of affirming cultural identities in curriculum, how we foster positive academic outcomes, develop students' ability to connect across lines of difference, elevate historically marginalized voices, empower students as agents of social change, and contribute to individual student engagement, learning, growth, and achievement through the cultivation of critical thinking. And so part of our goal tonight is that you see how much culturally responsive curriculum is all encompassing. It's not just about race. It's not just about one facet of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It really is about all of those things, but it's also about high expectations and rigorous instruction. How are we putting high quality curriculum in front of our students so that they are thinking at high levels and able to achieve whatever it is that they desire to achieve as a student here in West Irondequoit? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to take you through examples.
Sorry, I was muted. So we are going to start with how we affirm cultural identities. And I want to mention too, even though we've done our best to organize a presentation based on each one of these facets of the work, there is a lot of cross-pollination here. So there are going to be examples that likely hit on multiple aspects of this work, but we do think that they sort of are the strongest examples of specific things. So large scale, while in a moment you're going to hear about very specific curricular work that is going on, while that curricular work is going on, we also want to make sure that our students get a sense of celebration of different parts of their identity across the year on a larger sort of like building-wide scale. So we've put together this committee called the Heritage Celebrations Committee, which gets together about once a month and includes community members, it includes teachers, and it is done in partnership with BOCES that is focused on building a strong sense of connection and belonging between students, staff members, and community members through these sort of larger experiences that are done at the building and classroom level that give kids sort of the ability to sort of cultivate that curiosity and interest in being part of a larger global community. So when our committee gets together, we look through different resources and different materials that we can provide buildings so they can plan activities like doing daily announcements related to that cultural celebration, of doing some hallway decorating, doing specific sort of classroom activities that expose students to different identities and different cultures, so they can celebrate each other at the same time while they're still getting exposure through the curriculum that you're going to see in a moment.
This is an expansion of work that we previously started a few years ago through our Strong Voices project, which you may have heard of before. In our K-6 classrooms, we've been working to identify really strong texts for read aloud that can bring to life the different identities that are highlighted across the different heritage celebrations. We're continuing to pilot different read alouds across our classrooms. Keep an eye out for future opportunities for feedback, and we look forward to bringing some of those texts to the board later this year. In addition to celebrating heritage on a more building-wide scale, we are, as Orlando and Chrissy had alluded to, really working to bring this deeply into our curriculum. So one example that we wanted to highlight for you is from our 7th grade humanities course at Dake Junior High School. The humanities course is a unique class because it pulls the essential humanities skills from ELA standards and social studies standards, the most essential ones, and provides students with additional instruction and opportunity to sharpen those skills. However, there is no grade in this class, so we had to figure out a way to make sure that students are engaged without any threats of missing work or grades or anything like that. We wanted to make sure that this was intrinsically motivating for students. And so the way we did that was through identity work. So this is an example of a self-portrait drawn by one of our 7th grade students, Miss Bashir. And she developed, as part of this lesson, this is the visual brainstorm of different elements of her identity, the visible ones and the invisible ones. And this is housed under one of the essential standards for ELA of visible and invisible characteristics that can be identified within literature. Then students had to write a 100-word autobiography where students focused on concise sentence development, complex sentence structures, precise vocabulary to really put the meaning forward that they wanted to in a very short amount of space, really highlighting those essential writing skills. So students were highly engaged and really focused on meeting those high expectations for reading and writing. Next, we're going to shift into fostering positive academic outcomes. Next slide, please.
And so as you can see before, right, it all starts with curriculum. So as part of the work that we do through Curriculum Council, we have a common definition in our district to kind of express specifically what we mean when we say curriculum here in West Irondequoit. So at its most fundamental level, curriculum is what you see there in the bold. It's the standards-based guide to the content and the skills and the different learning experiences that every single student is going to get as part of any one course or any one program. But on a deeper level, our curriculum is the promise that we make to the community that every student is going to feel seen, they're going to feel heard, and they're going to broaden their understanding of the world, and that they're going to be a community member that is able to be empathetic and confident no matter what their path might be in life after they leave us.
Part of the way we do this in our curriculum, and Ms. Miga had alluded to that concept of viability, right? We want to make sure that this isn't aspirational, but something that occurs. One of the things that we want to make sure occurs for every student is access to high expectations and rigorous learning experiences. All students have opportunities for relevant, inclusive, and student-centered instruction, and all students have opportunities to advocate, to problem solve, and to collaborate as part of their learning experience, speaking to some of the goals we have for their learning that Dr. Marrero just alluded to. One of the ways in which we do this is the way in which we build a strong reading foundation, especially in our K-2 classrooms, which arguably is one of the most important components of our educational structure to make sure that our students can read. In doing so, over the past few years, we've been working hard to bring the science of reading research-based practices into our classrooms. This year, we came another step closer, making sure that every student has access to a teacher that has had some training and has all of the resources that they need to provide that direct instruction around phonemic awareness, phonics, and really developing and sharpening students' fluency. This really connects to CRE, or culturally responsive education, because it makes sure that students are getting that research-based best practice reading instruction that not only meets students where they are, but has really clear paths forward to support their growth. And if there are gaps in their reading, to really foster the closing of those gaps. But in addition, beyond fluency, we also want to make sure, as viewed below in the simple view of reading, that it's not just about word recognition, but it's also about language comprehension. We separated those two as part of our reading instruction, making sure that language comprehension is coming in through our humanities curriculum, which builds on comprehension standards, writing standards, language standards, and social studies standards, really bringing in opportunities for students to engage with grade level texts, complex vocabulary. Even if they're not reading on grade level, they're still having regular engagement with texts that are on grade level, just through different ways so that they can access that language and that vocabulary development. And together, that's really going to support students becoming strong readers.
Similarly, I do think math is really important too. Similarly, in math, we are spending a significant amount of time, K through 6, taking a really close look at how we teach and how we assess math fluency. We know from culturally responsive education that students make sense of the world in different ways. And if we are going to give them opportunities to be challenged, we need to get a better picture of how they think, how they make sense of content like mathematics. And so we can't test math fluency the way we tested it in the past. The way we tested it in the past was we would give students a certain number of problems. We would give them a certain amount of time to try and solve as many as we could. And we would collect that paper and we would use that to make decisions about how fluent the student was. The problem with that approach is that it only gives us a picture of how fast they're able to potentially solve a limited number of problems. And the only information that we really have on paper is the answer that they gave you. It doesn't really give us a picture into what they're thinking. So we spent a significant amount of time redefining fluency through research. And what we have found is that there are 3 main components to what we call procedural fluency, which is accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility. In other words, can they give us a correct answer? Can they do it in a reasonable amount of time? But then what strategies are they applying? Are they selecting a strategy that helps them be efficient? And how do they do that? What sort of thinking is going on when they choose a strategy to solve a problem? So right now we are working to kind of build better tools that give us information about student thinking, and then building instructional approaches that help us respond to that information that we're getting from kids. So the interventionists are currently working really hard to put those tools into place, and they're testing them out to see what information they can get from kids, putting forth additional interventions, and then looking at how that impacts how they teach and how we might approach this in the future in every classroom.
All right, at this point, we would just like to pause and ask any of our community members if you'd like to take the opportunity, whether it be in the Q&A or if you want to, tap your raise hand symbol, if you have a question or would like any further clarifications on what's been presented so far. Okay, at this time, seeing none, we're going to continue, but please know in another couple components, we'll stop again. So if there are questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A section. Thank you.
Next, we're going to shift our focus to discussing how we work to support students' ability to develop students' ability, let me start that one again. How we work to develop students' ability to connect across lines of difference. And one of the ways in which we do this is through inquiry-based instruction. We're going to focus in the social studies for this particular example, although this practice can certainly be used across content areas. Inquiry-based instruction is the practice of using questions, high-quality sources, and engaging students in discourse and critical thinking for students to have the space to develop their own conclusions and ask really important questions. we want to create for students in their classrooms a space where they feel like it's safe for them to express their thinking and safe for them to disagree with each other, where they learn how to respect one another's different opinions, where they learn how to support their thinking with evidence, ask questions, and really appreciate the diversity of thought that can occur within a learning space. This type of instruction really occurs K-12. Obviously, what it looks like in a kindergarten or first grade classroom is different from what it looks like in a 12th grade government classroom, but the principle is the same. Students really work hard with their teachers as the facilitator to work with one another, problem solve, think about the world around them, and make sense of it in a way that sits right with them. And so, yeah, this is a very important practice, and we'll continue forward from here. Inquiry-based instruction connects very deeply with our next component, which is our work to elevate historically marginalized voices. So in this example, we are looking to really leverage inquiry-based instruction to bring students opportunities to consider historically marginalized perspectives, to consider elements of history that might be unfamiliar to them, and do so in a way where they can really ask questions and have freedom of thought. In the past, you might have heard us speak about our redlining lessons. In a similar vein, we are looking to bring additional local history to really elevate the social studies standards. So in this case, we're looking at our 5th grade content, where the focus is looking at cross-cultural connections across the Western Hemisphere. That can be a really broad concept for students. So to make it real for them, we're bringing it local. And we're going to be diving deeply into the Latina civil rights movement here in Rochester, New York, and looking specifically at the Puerto Rican population in Rochester and the efforts that they took to use their agency and voice and make an impact in their community. Again, this will be a really great opportunity to consider some of these bigger social studies concepts through leveraging high-level literacy practices, analyzing primary source and secondary source documents. So really practicing those essential reading and writing skills, as well as applying some of the really important social studies skills and practices and developing that background content. Another effort that we're taking to bring students more opportunities to consider historically marginalized perspectives is through our K-12 library audit. Last year, our K-12 library media specialists took on a collection in each of their libraries to audit, both for considering diverse representation, but also considering date of publication and other elements to really make sure that the texts that we're putting in front of our students are modern and of the highest quality. So last year, we looked at the beginning reading section, fiction, science fiction, and nonfiction. And this year we are continuing that work, and you can see each grade level band library has taken on a different section to look at, and we'll continue to refine and build our collections for our students.
In a similar vein, we are in the very early stages of learning about and putting together a process to look at our music curriculum and do an audit of the pieces, the musical pieces that are used to teach music in our courses, and also the selections that we make for performances. The goal is really to look for opportunities for greater representation, right? We have a very diverse student population. So the musical pieces that they learn with and that they perform should represent also the population of our students. So we're going to be looking at those pieces and taking a look, and not just because they represent, right, our student, that's really, really important, but also because there's really, really good music outside of what we would call the classics that students stand to learn a lot from.
Okay, again, we're going to just take a moment to pause. And again, if there's any questions from our community members, please indicate in the Q&A, or you can raise your virtual hand. Okay, again, not seeing any, so we'll continue with our presentation.
So the next part of our work will be looking at how we empower students to be agents of social change. So as an example, in our 5th grade science classes, we have been, over the summer, we spent some time writing a unit of study about human impact. It's really about water as a natural resource, but we decided to focus it on human impact and how the decisions that we make as human beings in this world impact the natural world, and then conversely come back to us, potentially to haunt us. So this unit spent some time making sense of the Flint water crisis at the beginning to really sort of illustrate that point and how a community can be impacted by the decisions that we make on our environment and how we manage our limited sources of water. And then we turned our focus to a local connection at the Helmer Nature Center. So the Helmer Nature Center in Irondequoit is a wonderful representation of what our local ecosystem looks like. And it is an ecosystem that shows the impact of our actions locally in that ecosystem. So our students spent some time learning sort of like those interactions between the different spheres, the biosphere, the geosphere, and all those things, and what that looks like here at the Helmer Nature Center. As a product, as an assessment, students had to put together an informational brochure that explained a lot of the things that they learned in that unit, and then explain how those decisions that we make impact the local ecosystems, and then make recommendations for visitors of the Helmer Nature Center who could potentially pick up these brochures and get ideas about how what we do impacts the Nature Center and what we can do to help. So if you click one more time, there's a little animation here. I want to direct your attention to the center here, where each student spends some time, they're 5th graders, right? So their solutions are simple, but they might do things like explain that, right? Littering, trash can get into the pond and harm the fish that are there, right? So we go to a public park, we pick up our trash, we take it with us, right? They might make recommendations about fertilizer, not using too much fertilizer or dumping any dangerous chemicals into the grass, because it does eventually make it to our watershed in Irondequoit.
As our students continue their learning, once they reach their senior year, they will be taking their social studies government class, whether it's participation in government or AP government. And as part of this course, we've ensured all students have an opportunity to complete some of the components that would support students earning the Civic Readiness Seal. It's a new graduation seal. We were actually one of the pilot schools last year, and this year we're continuing to offer it along with many other schools across New York State. And really this speaks to the importance of building within students the capacity to harness their civic skills, their civic voice, understand what it means to be a civically engaged member of the community, and put that learning to practice. We're really excited about our continued refining of the opportunities we're offering to students in our government classes to support this learning. But so far, students have had opportunities to research, to speak with experts in the field, and to really learn from one another to develop these capacities.
And now we move forward with how our students can contribute, how we contribute to individual student engagement, learning growth, and achievement through the cultivation of critical thinking. So as an example, in 6th grade, our students engage in a STEAM unit that we call All Hands on Deck. In order for students to think critically, right, they do have to think about how their understanding of science, math, and the arts, right, how they sort of can integrate all of these different ideas and apply it to a complex problem. So in this case, students were in a STEAM unit where they spent some time learning about things like the muscular and skeletal system, but then they also learned aspects of engineering, of how we kind of put together components to simulate different parts of our body to build something that solves a problem. So if somebody needed, for example, a prosthetic hand, they used elements of the arts to kind of decorate their hand, potentially depending on the audience who's going to use the hand. Is it going to be a young person who would like it to look a certain way, or like look cool, like a Thanos's glove? Or does an adult want to use it and want to make it look more realistic, like their regular hand? And then on top of that, they have to use mathematical concepts in order to think about scale. How do I make this at a certain size that'll work for people of different sizes? So as they apply all of these different ways of thinking, they have a deep sense of engagement, a deep sense of learning and growth, and critical thinking about how they solve a problem in a multidisciplinary way. And then at the 7th and 8th grade, we've done some work with place-based learning that we're looking to expand. When I say place-based learning, I mean centering the learning similar to the unit connected to the Helmer Nature Center on our local context. How do the things that we learn in our classes help us understand our local area? So for example, at 7th grade, the teacher developed a unit and engaged students in a study of a very specific thing that happened at Lake Ontario, where somebody brought their pet, they brought their dog to swim in the lake, and the dog passed as a result. So students spent some time trying to figure out what it is about this lake and how we monitor our ability to swim in this lake that could have affected this dog. And they use very specific science context to make sense of that. And it's a problem that doesn't have a clean-cut answer. So they have to use very serious critical thinking to reach conclusions that they then have to defend. Different students might reach different conclusions, and they might all be right? But if they're using their critical thinking skills, if they can defend their choices, then they will have engaged in some of the highest level of thinking that we want them to. At the 8th grade level, similarly, they focused on invasive species also at Helmer Nature Center. They learned about how invasive species get somewhere and how we can find evidence of invasive species and what we can do to mitigate the effects. Similar, not a clean-cut problem that you can solve very easily, so students have to come up with different solutions, all of which could be right, as long as their reasoning makes sense.
Okay, again, we'd just like to pause if there's any questions. Okay, seeing none, we'll continue. So thank you to Mrs. Cristal and Dr. Marrero. They were able to share with you, again, just a variety of examples of how this work is coming to life in classrooms. And so obviously that is the most important piece, is how does this impact our students and how does it help them to achieve? But the other side to this is the ongoing preparation, professional learning and training that we have needed to put in place in order to support our teachers and staff in this work. So we wanted to make sure that we shared this aspect with our community so that you could understand the behind the scenes to what goes into all of those great student work examples that were just shared. So I've put together the professional learning and training that really is just occurring. I just really grabbed a sample that's been occurring since this past summer and this school year. So please know that this is a snapshot and just a portion of the training that has taken place. This is really our most recent professional learning and training. And so, for example, one of the pieces of our culturally responsive pedagogy, or excuse me, culturally relevant pedagogy work that we've actually been able to share quite a bit in different venues is our work with Dr. Hunter from Buff State and the cohorts that he is running, which are K-12 representative cohorts. And that work specifically focuses on culturally relevant pedagogy and how teachers are creating experiences that really empower student voice. So that's in alignment with our New York State culturally responsive framework, certainly the social studies framework from New York State as well, and it hits many of the different standards depending on the content in which we are trying to provide that student voice. So for example, the place-based learning that Dr. Marrero just shared was part of, as he engaged in the Dr. Hunter cohort, was part of some of that work to engage our students, and be even more connected with the community as they're working through their learning. So those cohorts ran last year, they continue through this year and are providing now a new set of K-12 representative teachers that ongoing professional development. We spoke earlier to the training utilizing the single point rubric. So as groups of teachers and staff are moving through to write curriculum for their content or grade level, they will utilize that single point rubric. And so every time teachers or staff write curriculum in West Arundecoit, moving forward now, they engage in a process to be trained on how to write curriculum in a way that's guaranteed, viable, and coherent. But then also they're trained and then implement the single point rubric to ensure that our curriculum is culturally responsive. So that continues as ongoing work. At the beginning of this school year, on our opening day, we provided a culturally responsive and sustaining education PD for all staff. We did it in two different groups, K-6 and 7-12, and I'll share a little bit more of that in a moment. We engaged our 7-12 staff, all 7-12 staff on that opening day, as well in safe zone training, as well as in October, a group of K-6 representative staff, including some of our K-6 counselors and support staff. Ms. Cristal has led the 7-12 humanities staff in PD around addressing harmful language in the academic setting. And again, I'll share a little bit more about that next. We continue to, across all content areas, provide learning on how to facilitate inquiries. So how do you help for students to become that facilitator of discourse, of discussions in an environment which promotes mutual respect and diversity? And all of our faculty, grade level, and department meetings are aligned and focused on how are we going to implement these pieces that we've been working on through culturally responsive curriculum. So for example, that single point rubric, that 4-part element is embedded into our guidance on our instructional model. So what does that look like? There's a lot of work across these meetings this year based on how does that instructional model look within the classroom setting. Department meetings are focused on the curriculum work. And then all of that has interwoven the New York State culturally responsive framework. And some of our other faculty meetings are focused on standards-based grading. So you can see that it's a really comprehensive and layered training that we're trying to provide teachers so that it isn't a one and done opportunity, that we're going to have multiple points to which they can continue to grow and deepen their understanding around culturally responsive curriculum. So on the next slide, this is an example of a slide as we were thinking, what could we show our community and our audience around this work that's really, that might pertain to you as family, guardians, community members at home. And so as we create this guaranteed viable curriculum through this curriculum writing process, what part of what's always been a fascinating and excellent facet of teaching is teacher autonomy. Teachers have had autonomy with curriculum and will continue to have autonomy here in West Arundecoit, meaning they're going to utilize their skills based on the curriculum in front of them to potentially supplement as appropriate the curriculum that we see. And so as we engage in this work together, to do this work right and to do it so that, we honor multiple perspectives. We honor the community and the students that are in front of us. As educators, we wanted to make sure that, again, we're just all on the same page and working together as a K-12 staff. So we put together this process, or this thought process, for our staff, so that as they are supplementing, what are the things that they should be thinking about, and how are we being transparent, communicating with families if it's particularly about any lesson of a sensitive subject, and then how do we also take into consideration our community and the students in front of us. That is one of the most important components of, if we think of culturally responsive education, it's this idea of funds of knowledge, of what are the students bringing to the table based on their experiences, their cultures, and their lives, and how are we making sure that we're tapping into that in order to deliver the best lessons and curriculum possible. And so that was an example of just what are some of those tools that we can put in place as a district to support our teachers, to support our students. And so in that list of professional learning and training, we also talked towards this professional learning that Mrs. Cristal has put on for our 712 humanities staff, and as a co-facilitator with one of our amazing teachers, Gabrielle Brannigan, who teaches at Dake. And they have put together an experience in how do we address harmful language in the academic setting. So what happens if we come across something in a text, or we come across something in media, whatever form that may take, that could be potentially harmful to our students. So they've engaged them in a 2-session training in how do we address that language, but also how do we build trust between students and teachers and vice versa. Ms. Cristal, anything to add to that piece?
Well, thank you, Chrissy. That was a great summary, actually. One thing I just wanted to point out too is how connected this work is to both the instructional model, to the curriculum work that we've described, and to a lot of the other work ongoing in our district. So helping teachers to see this is not necessarily something new, but using the skills that they've been developing over the past few years in particular to really figure out ways to develop the kind of academic community that can handle addressing sensitive topics, that can manage their way through resources and texts and media that have challenging, potentially harmful language in them, especially in the humanities that sometimes is even part of our curriculum. And so helping teachers have the tools to facilitate these kinds of discussions so that students feel safe and ready to engage in this learning, even if it's potentially upsetting, even if it's potentially difficult or uncomfortable. And so it's ongoing work. We're definitely not done, but we're excited for the work that started and looking forward to continuing to develop our skills in this way.
So these are just 2 examples of that ongoing professional learning and training. We know how important it is, like I said earlier, not to provide kind of one and done pieces. We have to just continually come back, engage ourselves in discussion, try to have those open lines of communication with all stakeholders and amongst ourselves, because this work is incredibly important, but also really deserves the due diligence to take our time and make sure that what we're putting out for students is of high quality, aligned to standards, and really meaningful to their lives. And so as we think about then what comes next, obviously we're going to continue this work. Everything you've heard about, again, is really just the tip of the iceberg as far as the work that we're doing in district. So we're going to continue this work. We're going to continue to build curriculum through that lens of coherent, guaranteed, viable, and culturally responsive, to provide our students with these authentic, engaging, and thought-provoking learning experiences. But there's also a what next on how can we continue to provide this clear communication. If we go all the way back to those initial goals of this work, that it's our job to continue to clearly really communicate and develop the understanding of our community stakeholders as well. So we want to speak now to a couple opportunities. Thank you. That we can continue to garner that parent, guardian, and community input. So as Kim mentioned earlier, we're continuing that development through Heritage Months. And as I believe Orlando shared, that's we already have some community input. We have working with our BOCES partners. And so we already have a committee that's working to develop the materials and resources for Heritage Months. But specifically, you know, this project of our Strong Voices that really started during COVID, when that first, you know, March 2020, and we said, how can we still ensure that our students are feeling supported and engaging in these rich, authentic read alouds? But of course, then so many things have come up the past few years that it has extended the length of the work. And so we continue though with an end goal this year to be able to identify and eventually have board approved K-6 read alouds so that we can guarantee again that it's part of the curriculum. But we want to continue to provide opportunities for parent, guardian, and community input on those since we want them to represent our community. And that's the purpose of those read alouds. So we are looking to partner with the PTSA and other avenues to be able to have parents and guardians and communities take a look at some of those and provide some feedback and just have a chance to see what eventually will be something that all students will see and hear. And then in addition to that, also in 2020-21 school year, we started our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coalition. And so we're moving into our third year of this coalition, and we are looking for obviously continued membership from those who have served, but also we're looking to get even more parents, guardians, and community members involved. So there is a link in the chat to everybody. And this we can also post and we'll send out district-wide as well. For any community members, teachers, anybody in the West Arundecoyt community across the board would like to participate, we're putting the application out again for this year. We're trying to really focus in on having less dates of meetings since we really struggled to get everybody to attend last year, just given everybody's busy schedules. So we're trying to put out 2 initial dates that we're really asking if you are part of this committee that you're able to commit to these 2 dates, while there may be more additional dates afterwards. And we're going to break into subcommittees again this school year, the same subcommittees we had last year, which were curriculum, human resources, and family engagement. We are going to utilize the coalition to help us continue that work around the K-6 read alouds. So that would be the primary work of that subcommittee this year. Human resources is going to continue the work that we have engaged in, led by our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and diversifying staff. So Michelle Kramer will facilitate that subcommittee. And then our family engagement subcommittee, facilitated by Joe Jackson, really looked at what are the best practices in family engagement last year. And then we're going to take those practices and apply them to helping to develop the understanding of restorative practices with our community. So that will be the work that subcommittee will take on. And again, Mr. DeVeronica, I see you've just put it into the chat again. So if you are interested, please complete this form. And then depending on how many submissions we get, we'll let everybody know who we're able to select for the committee by the end of November. But we're excited to invite everybody in again to help make sure that as we create this curriculum, as we engage in this work, that we do have that representation of all of the perspectives of our West Arundecoyt community within this work. And so We will end again, just opening it up for any questions, comments, discussion. We just want to say thank you to, obviously we're here representing the work, but this has been such a collective effort of all of our staff, administrators, and our students as well. They've played a very large part in this. So just want to thank Dr. Johnson, Mrs. Cristal, and Dr. Marrero. And we'll turn it back to Dr. Johnson before we open it up to any questions.
Well, thank you. I mean, we have such a talented team here, and as Chrissy had said, I mean, the great thing about this, and you know, what struck me during the presentation, your words about if we're going to do this right, we're going to do this together. And joining this work 4 years ago, this has been going on for years. But it's really the people that have brought this forward through the development, and everybody's added a piece. The administrators that we see here tonight, our staff, like Chrissy has said, our students, but even our community as well has informed this. Because again, I go back to the slide that our curriculum is our promise to the community. This isn't our curriculum, the people that are sitting here tonight, or even the district. It's our curriculum as a community. We have standards that we have to abide by. But as you can see here, it's really ensuring that our students are making those connections across perspectives, across venues, developing that problem solving, the critical thinking that it can apply in so many arenas. And so as a superintendent, I sit here very proudly as we discuss and present this body of work. And again, it starts from the top of these people and it really extends back to our Board of Education with the guidance that they've set, the policies, the support. So I just want to thank everybody at large. But with that, I want to open it up if there are any questions from our panel or any additional, any questions from our attendees, and any comments from our panel. You're free to ask questions as well, panelists, but
no questions in the queue.
okay. Well, I appreciate that. If anything does develop from the community, of course, you can always contact any of the people that you see here on the screen, or the people that you feel most comfortable with. Maybe it's a building administrator or somebody within the district that has a connection to this work. And we'll continue to have opportunities to have this dialogue along the way. And of course, we are taping this session tonight because we recognize that people are busy and we want to offer the opportunity to review these materials and to hear this information for people that weren't able to attend tonight. So we'll be posting that very soon. So again, thank you, panelists, for your time tonight and for our attendees. And we look forward to seeing you along the way. Have a great night. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Very soon.